Can I get a motion on that?
I second the motion.
Okay.
Is Jeff here today? I can't see
I'm
everybody
sorry.
who's
Yes,
in the
Jeff is
room.
here. I wrote things down and then didn't say it out loud. And
Okay.
Beth is here too.
Oh, wonderful.
And I got a second from Marina. All in favor? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And our first agenda item is, or our second one is the discussion and assignment of the subcommittees. Would anyone like to start with the discussion?
Yeah, I can fill in with what I know. My understanding is that Jordan and Beth, and I'm forgetting who else was involved. There was a third person. Jordan, who else was? And Elena. Yes, Elena. I don't know if anyone else was involved. Went over the 140 some odd items that CNA and the collaborative, recommendations from CNA and the collaborative. And I then took that information and put it into a file, which was put on the communal, on the shared drive. And that shows what's completed and what's ongoing, and it has some details. Since then, we've gotten some conversation with me and Dale and with Jordan. We've gotten further clarification about what completed meant for some items, and that was forwarded to me, and I will be inputting that and sending out another rev in the near term. As far as my subcommittee, which is subcommittee C, that's the one that I'm on, I didn't really think that it made any sense to meet until I was able to import the information that I received onto this master, this revived master. So I will be having a meeting very soon. As far as B and A and D, I really don't know what the status is.
Is there anybody here at the meeting that's what's going on with that committee?
That was myself, Judge Zonderman, and Dale. We met on Saturday. Dale had a list of questions. I think they're just clarifications that she sent over to Chief Cochin. But as far as where it went from there, I'm not really sure. We just left that meeting with the fact that we had a discussion and then everyone was going to be here tonight for this meeting.
Is anyone here from B or D?
Yes. D is completed. That was Chief Koshin and me.
D is completed?
And we submitted our results to you, I think, last month.
So Marina, yeah, that meeting that you were describing, so we had a couple different variations of that meeting to include times where Jess and I met. Jamie was involved at one point. She met discussing some of the stuff as well, just kind of from an update perspective of budget and things of that nature. So some of the things that I submitted in that spreadsheet would have encompassed Group D and also Group B, just as far as kind of those updates. And then we're just dealing with the questions as they arise from the members of each of those subcommittees right now. So for instance, like
Yeah.
Alice and I had a meeting at some point. I
Yeah.
can't even tell you exactly when it was. But we haven't met since then because I've been putting together that sheet to get to you
Yes,
to be able
yes,
to do
yes.
that. So
Okay. Well, obviously, all of the subcommittees will have further work to do, but I just want to make sure that I didn't misunderstand what was just said. I was not under the impression that D was completely completed. Is that accurate?
no, it's not. We're still discussing things.
Okay, right. That's my
yeah.
understanding.
Completed meant
Okay.
that we completed that portion of the spreadsheet and understood
Gotcha.
kind of where we stood on things. Yes.
Thank you. I understand now. Thank you.
Yes.
And I'd like to talk about something that's on that's one of the items that we need to work out, which is the Civilian Review Board. And I'm still trying to find out if anyone that I know, I don't know anyone in a close network, but from some peripheral networks that I'm involved in, if anyone knows of a town, a municipality the size of Niskayuna, roughly, that had a Civilian Review Board. So I'm trying to get information on that still. And Elena, I've started reading about the Taylor Law, but since Civilian Review Board is a major item that's on the recommendation list, I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind just sharing what you know with everyone so we're all on the same page.
Sure. So during Group C's, one of our subcommittees, there was a discussion on the Civilian Review Board, and I had started to do some research. And recently in 2021, there was a court case that came down out of the city of Rochester where the Rochester police union had filed suit against the city for their Civilian Review Board. And the court held that the Civilian Review Board was illegally created because the main reason was that it violated the Taylor Law. So the Taylor Law was created basically establishing unions and the rights of unions and what's mandatory subject of negotiation versus non-mandatory subject of negotiation. And when I use those two terms, there's certain areas of, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess police operations. Well, that's one of the things. So police operations that require that if the town or municipality wants to make changes to it, that it has to be negotiated with the union, that the town can't unilaterally make policies and procedures related to those particular areas. And then there's non-mandatory subjects of negotiation where a municipality can make some unilateral changes, but may negotiate with a union, and that it can become a subject of negotiation, but is not mandatory. But the Rochester court had said, and it was, I believe it was the highest court, but it might have been the appellate division. Either way, it was one of the higher courts of New York State, that they had held that police discipline specifically as a mandatory subject of negotiation, and that the city could not unilaterally create the Civilian Review Board as it did without negotiating with the union and creating something that the union also agreed to. So that was sent back as illegal. And I had stated in our meeting that I believe that that will probably be a very difficult hurdle to overcome because it is a mandatory subject of negotiation. And, you know, not speaking for the PBA, but my experience is that they typically do not approve through negotiations something of that magnitude. And there's several reasons for that. We can get into it a little bit more, but Marina, I think your question had to do more so with the Taylor Law, and the Taylor Law would be that we would have to negotiate that with the union through negotiations and a contract like we typically do. So right now we're about to start negotiations with the PBA, just our, standard, their union collective bargaining agreement has expired. So we're about to start negotiations on that.
Right.
So that's what I'm referencing when I say negotiations.
Yes, Elena, is the Taylor Law a federal law?
So there's federal and New York State. It depends on, the Taylor Law specifically is New York State, but there are federal laws that could potentially have an impact on this discussion as well.
The reason that I asked you that question is I know there are civilian review boards, I think even in the Capital District. So how do they get around the Taylor Law? Do they or don't they?
Well, that I don't know. I know I had asked Dale so Dale and I had discussed yesterday the bylaws, and we went through the proposed bylaws. And during that discussion, we talked about several different items. And one of the things that had come up was that question, because I know we were looking to potentially have Albany or question Albany about their Civilian Review Board. And I had questioned, just because I'm not aware as to when it was developed and if it predated the Civilian Review Board or if it did not predate the Civilian Review Board. Because if it didn't, then I don't know the answer as to how it was created, but I think, sorry, yes, predated the Taylor Law.
Yeah, that was something that I said I would call up the Law and Justice Center in Albany, and I haven't gotten around to that yet. I will definitely highlight that and take care of that and try to find out.
Can I ask a process question?
Sure.
So if our goal as a subcommittee to the Police and Public Safety Committee is to make recommendations to the Police and Public Safety Committee, would our next step be to decide as a subcommittee if we would like to make that recommendation? Like, would we all talk and decide together if that's going to go forward as a recommendation, or is that already?
So
That's not my understanding at all of what this task force is designed to do.
So this task force has been specifically created by the town board, and the resolution that set forth this task force said that the task force obligations and duties are to go through the recommendations of the collaborative and do two things with those. One is to divvy them up, for lack of a better word, between impactful financially or not impactful. And the other is to establish a timeline for implementation of those recommendations, if appropriate. So this task force would be tasked with determining if the Civilian Review Board is appropriate for the town of Niskuna, and then determining a timeline for implementation. But what the Civilian Review Board would look like if it's determined to be appropriate would not be the under the purview of this task force based on the resolution that created it. So it could be, I mean, in theory, there could be a recommendation made to another committee as
Yes,
to what it would look like, I guess, if that makes sense.
Okay, so our job now is to decide, maybe not today, but decide if that's something we want to recommend.
it's already been recommended.
It's already
We have to
recommended.
do something. We're obligated because of the resolution that the town of Niskuna passed. I don't remember the number, that we're obligated to implement in one way or another all of the recommendations made by the collaborative and also made by CNA.
So actually the way, I don't think I have the resolution pulled, but the way the resolution read is that it would be, so this task force is not necessarily tasked with with a plan of implementation as to each and every recommendation, because it has to be determined that the recommendations are appropriate. So the first question would be impactful versus non-impactful to the budget. And then as far as determining timelines, if the recommendations are deemed by this task force to be appropriate for Niskuna, then we would have, this task force would be tasked with specifically identifying an estimated implementation timeline. I know we have, so the further resolve clause of 2021-76, the last further resolve clause states that the creation of the Niskuna Police Reform Implementation Task Force is to ensure that the recommendations promulgated by the Niskuna Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative Steering Committee and CNA Audit are reviewed and implemented as appropriate, and to also ensure that the discussion does not stop here. I know that there was a follow-up where we added a representative from the PBA to the membership. And I believe that there might have even been another one
Yeah, there was
specific
another one
to
where
the,
instead of having 3 people who were not town employees, it went to 5.
so it went to 5. I know that there was one with the PBA that was added, and I believe that there was a
That was
separate one.
That was added later. It's my understanding. But I know there are 2 people on this call that were involved with the collaborative, if I'm correct, John Lemelin, and if I'm correct, Cobra Cox. And I'm wondering if they could please address their understanding of what the word appropriate means, because we all are not on the same page about the interpretation of that word.
Yeah, this is John Lemelin. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Apologize about not turning on my camera, but I'm in my phone. I'm on my phone in my car. but I have pulled over. So yeah, I was on the Task Force for Racial Equity, and I was also on the collaborative work task force effort. And Elena, I think you're right. I think it's important to read the actual resolution, and I think that last clause that you read, ensure the implementation was where I interpreted that to mean that this group is going to plan and ensure the implementation of those recommendations as appropriate. And that to me means, like CRB is a good example. I think there's a recommendation, well, assuming there's a recommendation that says you should implement a CRB, then the details of exactly how you go about doing that and how you negotiate with PDA is the as appropriate part. So it wasn't, I think it's significant to mention that the resolution doesn't say if appropriate. The resolution says as appropriate, and obviously CRB is a huge thing. Albany has one and the city of Schenectady has one. And it's definitely something we want to see implemented. But the details of exactly how you implement it is obviously, up to this group and up to the town and up to PBA contract negotiations, et cetera. I don't know if that helps.
That was my understanding also, John. Thank you.
So that sounds like it might be something to table for next time and talk more about to make sure everyone, maybe we can have a better attendance and we can all discuss.
Yeah,
Without
I
chair.
think that it's really important to clarify
Yeah.
that the collaborative's work was to come up with recommendations, and we're not coming up with our own recommendations, but my understanding is that we are responsible for making sure that each recommendation is dealt with appropriately, not deciding which recommendations are appropriate to deal with. And that's a very important distinction.
So just adding to that, and again, I understand we're going to have further discussions, but just from a legal standpoint, I just want to make sure that what I was saying is clear, is that there are definitely legal impediments to a civilian review board. I'm not sitting here saying that those legal impediments could never be overcome. I don't know the history behind the city of Schenectady or the city of Albany, but if there is a legal impediment that would prevent us from having a civilian review board, such as police discipline being a mandatory subject of negotiation and us not being able to reach a resolution during negotiations on that, then that is a legal impediment that would address the appropriate issue, because it may be that there's a legal impediment that we're just not able to overcome.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure that that was, from a legal standpoint, that's clear.
Elena, that's perfectly clear. But the question, this is not a yes, but this is a separate thought. I hear what you're saying. The separate thought that I'm having is Schenectady is right next door. So that, how did they get around the Taylor law? So maybe it makes more sense to actually find that out in terms of Schenectady as well as Albany. Especially since the police one, what they're doing is all kind of in lockstep. I find it hard to believe, even though Schenectady is a totally different municipality, I find it hard to believe that their laws would be so very different.
So I don't want to speak out of turn because I'm not going to say I have concrete, definitive information on this, but there's differences between, review boards from the standpoint of what their scope is. And I think that's what Elena's touching on. So my understanding, my research of review boards is, dictating what is that scope? Is it more of a review of policy? Is it an advisory committee, which is something that they actually completely separate at times and they speak about? So it's possible, like my understanding of Albany's was they actually tried to establish, I think there was a local law that was established, and they've been having a lot of issues with that with regards to the PBA because of Taylor laws and negotiated discipline agreements and things of that nature. I don't know the full extent of it. I'm just speaking from a distance in what I've seen and read in the news. But it's possible that Schenectady's and Albany's very may well be two completely different things too, with regards to what their scope are. So we can certainly explore those things and get that information before we could speak further to kind of understand that better. I think that would make the most sense.
Yeah.
Do you think so, Marina?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is very, very helpful because I'm very ignorant about a lot of things. And when I joined this task force, I knew that I would have to do a lot of research and talk to a lot of people. I don't come to this task force pretending in any way, shape, or form to be an expert on policing. I certainly am not. So thank you for giving me some direction. Thank you.
And I was just going to say to Marina, I am not an expert. That's why I don't want to speak out of turn. Even if I've misspoken this, I apologize. They very may well be both full civilian review boards that have some sort of disciplinary might. I'm not familiar with how they operate. But like I
Right.
said, I think we need to really look at that before we just say that we think that they have this or we think they have that and how come we
Right.
can't do it kind of a thing, if that makes
Right.
sense.
But what's very helpful to me about what you did, Jordan, is that I have some questions to ask. I can start the conversation.
Sure. And I can certainly reach out to Chief Clifford and ask him some of those questions to see if I can get some better insight. Because I know that they have, for instance, they have some sort of civilian interview committee that their new candidates go through. So there's various components to what I think is falling under this big umbrella of what civilian review or
Right.
advisement is, if that makes sense.
Right. Yes, no, it makes perfect sense. Implementation is in knowing the details.
Yes.
I fully understand. One more thing to put on my to-do list.
That was a great discussion. The more we all learn about this, it's
Yeah,
better.
absolutely, Jessica.
So one of the things I had brought up, I think to everybody here, maybe individually, was in moving the task force agenda forward, as we have 4 subcommittees that have been meeting. It sounds as though at least one, if not 2, groups have at least put together a preliminary comments as to impactful versus non-impactful and an estimated timeline for implementation. So
All of them have, Elena, every
Okay.
single one.
So I'm proposing maybe moving forward that we pick a group for each meeting and we collectively as a group go through their comments and have a discussion. We can always circle back to a group if there needs to be further discussion, but at least just for a plan moving forward and having a particular agenda for the meetings that we can all plan for, it would make sense in my mind to at least do it that way. I don't know what everybody else's opinions are, but
I agree.
just.
I think it's great.
I agree with you, Elena.
I like that structure.
So since everybody is here from Group C, how about when we meet, I'll set up another meeting that we be the first ones to go. How does that sound? And
I'm okay with that.
We'll
That's you too.
work through this in our meetings between now and next month. How does that sound? Everybody okay with that?
I'm okay with that. Dale's part of that group as well.
Right.
I'm sure he'll be okay with it. No, Dale's not part of Group C.
I thought she was A and C.
I have her as D as
I know
well.
she's definitely part of Group A because we met
Oh, is she
Saturday.
part of C?
But I
I
thought she
don't
was
remember
part of
her
Group
coming.
C. I don't think she's made the last meeting
Yeah, I don't think she can make the last
That's fine.
meeting, but she was at the
Okay.
first one.
because it was you,
You weren't at the
myself.
last one, were you?
I wasn't here at this actual one. That's when I had COVID.
Oh, okay.
But the sub meeting, the C
Okay.
meeting, I think it was you, I, and
Okay.
So-
So
Well, I
I'm
know that Dale is going on vacation, but there's 4 weeks between now and the next meeting, and she's going away probably tomorrow or the next day. So there'll be still 3 weeks that she can join. I'm sure we can come up with a mutually acceptable time to have the meeting.
I think so too.
I have it written on my other one that this is a remake of it. So, but we were A and C.
Okay, so Group C will go first at the next meeting. And I
Yep.
think that there might be some discussion. I think Dale's planning on sending out the bylaws that we went over yesterday. So I think that that'll be on for discussion in April as well.
Is there anyone at this meeting that might consider taking on the secretary job?
So I talked to Dale about that yesterday a little bit, and I've been giving it some thought. The issue, I think, is that every one of us probably who's here at this meeting has a lot on their plate right now, so it might be too much to have one individual person take on that role, but maybe we can work together and help divvy up that so that it's not too much for one person.
That sounds like a plan.
So maybe somebody could put out the agenda, somebody can work on the minutes. I don't know what else. Is there something else I'm missing?
No.
Those are the two main things, I think.
Are you talking about divvying up the tasks, but would it be the same person doing a fraction of the tasks?
So like if one of the things that Allison was doing was putting together the agenda and sending it out. So one person could volunteer to do that and they would continuously do that
Okay,
every month. Then somebody could volunteer to put together the minutes and they would continuously do that every month. So that's kind of what I was just thinking, that if it's one
enough.
thing per person, then it's less.
yeah. Okay,
And if there's anything else that she was doing regularly that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, we can do that too.
I guess we'll discuss this further next time.
Okay. And I mean, I volunteered to put together the minutes for this meeting, so I'll take that role for now.
And who's going to put together the agenda? Did anyone volunteer? I don't remember.
I
For
mean,
next time.
to be honest with you, that's not going to be much different than what I'm doing, so I can just do that for the next meeting.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
No problem. Is there anything else that anybody else wish to discuss tonight?
This is John Lemon. I do have one other quick update.
Sure, go ahead, John.
We have time. This is just a quick update from the Task Force on Racial Equity and Justice. Cobra and I are on that group. First, it's exciting to see you guys, go through this process, and I appreciate the opportunity to watch and attend your meetings. So as we've talked about, your task force, the Police Reform Implementation Task Force, is going to look through the recommendations and assess the budget and assess the timing and ensure implementation. Our task force, which is the Racial Equity and Justice Task Force, is charged with tracking progress. So we're kind of the maybe independent group that's just going to help keep track of what you guys are doing and how. So we're very much looking forward to working with you on that. With that in mind, we've developed a tracking sheet. It's in the final process, so hopefully we'll be able to send it to you shortly in the next week or so. It's very similar to the master tracking document that Marina's using. It has each of the recommendations broken out with a place to fill in the status and a place to fill in the budget impact and schedule and things like that. So I think it's going to be consistent with what you guys are using. But it is something that we're going to put together and send you with the hopes that we can work together to complete it. And we're going to use that as the basis for our report. We have an annual report due in June, and we'd like to use the information that you provide us and that we work with you on the status of the recommendations to complete our report.
John, I apologize. I need to send you, I didn't realize that the Task Force for Racial Equality and Justice was that you were tasked with tracking progress, because had I realized that, I would have sent you the latest rev, which you don't have access to. The latest rev took what you've already seen and it created a bunch more columns to what's been completed, what's ongoing, how long we expect it to take, and comments. So rather than reinventing the wheel, I'll get that to you today. As soon as this call ends, I'll make sure that you have it.
Thank you.
Because I think that will dovetail exactly with what you're trying to do.
No, that sounds great, Maria. And if I can be a resource to anybody else, I am on the task force along with Cobra. We're on the public safety working group. And I happen to have participated in the collaborative work. So if there's anything I can do to help, happy to do that as well. But thank you, Marina.
Is it, John, is it fair to send it to you as the contact person, any additional revs, or is there an email that pertains specifically to your task force that I should use? How do you want me to get information to you?
Yeah, actually, why don't you, our task force email, I think, is taskforce@niskuna.org. I'll confirm our email and send you a note, Marina. I'm sorry, I'm in the car, but we do have a task force email that I'll send you.
Right. And I think that you'll see that we're thinking along the same lines, because that's exactly what was done in the latest incarnation of the master. You'll see that that's exactly what you're trying to do, is exactly what was done.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all.
Just one thing real quick, going back to the discussion on if Allison's going to step down as secretary, I believe she should be the keeper of all minutes and agendas and any other documents of this task force. So my thoughts are maybe she can forward all that to me and I can keep everything in a binder here at Town Hall.
Couldn't it just go on the shared drive that Jamie created?
I'm not aware of that, so that was before me.
We created a shared drive to be able to, like, a Google Drive to dump things to work together and collaborate on. I'm sorry. I'm just explaining to Elena what Jamie had created to help facilitate us sharing documents with one another. I don't know.
I'll send you the link as soon as the meeting ends. I'll send you the link.
Okay, does the link have the? Okay, somebody else indicated that they're not able to get into it, but I just want to make sure that it will at least include the agenda and the meeting minutes. I don't know if it typically does.
Include some of them, but I don't know how up to date it is.
Okay, we can
Because
continue the discussion.
I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure all the records are kept in one place as they're
Right,
supposed to be. That's
right.
all.
The only thing that I made sure was on there was all the revs of this master that I'm doing, because all of the 4 subcommittees are making sure that I get the information, because I send out a PDF, because I think that only one person should be inputting the information, because if somebody makes a typo, like if something should say 3 to 6 months and somebody makes a typo and it says 6 to 12 months, that's the problem. And I hope that, somebody overchecked my work, but this was to avoid errors. So I made sure that I put all the revs on this shared drive.
Okay.
Marina, do you know if Allison is resigning from the subcommittee or just as secretary?
I really don't know.
Okay.
She sent out an email that everybody got that said, I have a lot of family issues. Can anyone take over?
Okay, so we'll clarify with her. Just wondering.
Okay.
No big deal.
Yeah.
Are there any other discussion points? Third on the agenda is next steps, which I think we covered.
Yeah.
We're going to be, the next meeting would be April 7th at 5:30. Next steps would be Elena's putting together the minutes and agenda. We're going to be reviewing Group C as our first subgroup to review as a subcommittee together. And we're also going to be revisiting some more information we'll gather about civilian review boards, different scopes that different towns or cities might be utilizing. Did I miss anything?
I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. So a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
I second that.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Marina.